New manufacturers are popping up all the time, and it's our mission here at Six Sided Discs to get our hands on each one of them and find out what you need to know about their discs. Which means this week we're not only testing the entire Goliath discs lineup, but we're also determining what popular mainstream disc is most like each of their 12 molds. Hey everyone, it's Greg from Six Sided Discs, and this is our first impression series, where we test, compare, and explore new discs, plastics, and manufacturers from across the world of disc golf. If you're enjoying our content, please consider supporting us by becoming a channel member. You'll get great perks like exclusive videos and live streams, early access to videos, and even discounts on our website, sixsideddiscs.com, where you'll find over 30 different brands and even discounted discs that we've thrown in videos. That's enough about us though. Let's talk about Goliath discs, because we have 12 discs to get through and no time to waste. Up first, let's take a look at their first putter, the Waymaker. The Waymaker is a putter rated at 2.4-1.2, and the design is pretty interesting. It's deep, feels pretty chunky in the hand, and it has a big bead. And based on that look and feel, I wasn't really expecting it to get along well with Caleb, but I was wrong. Because on the first shot, Caleb got a really nice, smooth, slightly overstable flight. I was so impressed, I gave Caleb the old twice or it's luck, and well, turns out it wasn't luck. The Waymaker is here in Goliath's OT plastic, a base blend with a medium stiffness and grip. OT is short for Old Testament, which probably tells you all you need to know about the naming scheme that Goliath Discs uses, but we'll talk about that more in just a bit. First though, what existing, more mainstream disc would we compare the Waymaker to? While it has nothing in common in terms of shape or feel, the flight does remind me of an Axiom Envy, at least in premium plastic. By no means is it going to fly as far as an Envy, but that straight to then slightly reliably overstable finish is pretty much what you're looking for from your average Envy. Next up is another putter, the Covenant. Formerly called the Genesis, the Covenant is a beadless putter rated at 3.4-1. And similar to the Waymaker, it's a nice big putter with a comfortable hand feel, somewhat similar to the Innova AVR or Discmania P2. We have the Covenant in the same base OT plastic, as well as this premium semi-translucent plastic called Oasis. Oasis is a medium stiffness premium blend here on the Covenant and reminds me a lot of slightly softer versions of Innova's Champion plastic and some runs of Prodigy 400. Once again, we'll talk more about their plastics in just a moment, but first let's see the Covenant in action. And despite the flight numbers of 3.4-1, Caleb saw a very consistent slow turn from the base Covenant and quite a bit more turn from the premium Oasis Covenant. So at least for faster arms, it's more understable than advertised. But there's a lot more to learn about Goliath discs than just these first two putters can tell us. So let's take a moment to summarize what we do know about Goliath. Goliath Discs is based in Spirit Lake, Iowa, and they're a small, faith-based family business. With previous experience as both an apparel company and sporting goods store, Goliath Discs now manufactures a full line of disc golf discs, which launched with their first disc, the Gyra, which we'll be throwing shortly. While their discs are currently made overseas, they do have plans to bring that manufacturing in-house in the future, but they're not in a hurry to do so because they operate their business very similar to how we operate ours, 100% debt-free. And while that may limit some growth opportunities, 2 years in now, they have a dozen approved molds with more on the way. All of the disc and plastic names have a biblical theme, which makes them the sort of yin to doomsday discs, dark and gloomy yang in the disc golf marketing world. But let's get back into the discs now and take a look at their other putt and maybe more approach disc, the Pillar. The Pillar is the only disc in Goliath's lineup that we're actually familiar with from previous videos. We tested the glow on the Pillar in our glow plastic comparison late last year. We threw the Pillar in our Flight Numbers Don't Matter approach disc accuracy test. And the Pillar featured way back in September in a video I really enjoyed making, our 16 discs we've never thrown in 16 minutes video.
Holy crap.
What? And what we learned from all of that is that the Pillar is overstable. And that remains true today. Here we can see the pillar showing us every bit of its 2 glide and 4 fade. Now, I think it would be easy to compare the pillar to the Discraft Zone because approach disc, flat top, and the profile is somewhat similar, but it is very much more Zone OS than Zone. So the pillar is definitely more approach disc than putter, but one disc that knows exactly what it is Goliath's first approved mold, the Gyra. Shout out to my wife Emily for helping me with the pronunciation here. The Gyra is a straight mid-range, rated at 5.5 -1.1. The shape and design of the Gyra isn't immediately like any other straight mid-range. In fact, it sort of blends elements of multiple mid-ranges. The top of the wing shape reminds me of a Buzz, while the bottom reminds me more of a Rock 3. There's even a tiny micro bead hiding on the edge of the rim as well. Caleb will be throwing it in the base OT plastic. So how is this neutral mid-range and base plastic going to handle Caleb's power and torque? Well, way better than I expected. I'm willing to bet a premium plastic would have had a little bit more stability, but this base plastic did so well. It shows a subtle turn on the first shot here. And just a little more turn on the second when it's given a little more power. The Gyra would make a great mid-range for newer players who are just learning to manipulate angles and shot shapes. Unsurprisingly, it most closely resembles mainstream mid-ranges like the Buzz, or I think in this plastic, maybe a Buzz SS. Moving on now from a mid-range that claims to be straight to one that just is. This is the Redemption. Rated at 5.502, the Redemption feels very similar to the Gyra. It's a shallow, wide diameter mid-range. The design of the mold is very different, swapping the smooth, rounded design of the Gyra for a big, blunt leading edge here on the Redemption. This Redemption we have here is also in a different premium metal flake plastic called NT, or New Testament. It feels pretty similar to the Oasis Covenant we felt earlier, but flies quite similar to the Gyra. Because as you can see here, it's just super straight. Which for me makes the Redemption a lot like a Discmania S-Line MD3, a disc that claims to be slightly overstable, but in reality is pretty straight. Next, we have their final mid-range, and one thing I can guarantee here is that it is not going to be straight. This is the Samson. Rated at 5.303.5, the Samson is most certainly not designed to be straight, but rather it's designed to be a flat-top, aggressively overstable disc that we have in 2 different plastics. First in their base OT plastic, and also in this beautiful swirly Oasis blend. This swirly Oasis blend is feeling a lot stiffer than some of the plastics we've felt so far. So can the Samson deliver on this promise of overstability? Yes, it can. Whether on forehands or backhands, in either plastic, the Samson is an unapologetic meat hook in the best way possible. Fitting in comfortably alongside discs like the Dynamic Discs Justice, the Samson was clearly designed with windy Iowa courses in mind. Goliath's 3 mid-ranges certainly made an impression, so let's see if their trio of fairway drivers can do the same. Beginning here with the Enoch. The one we have today is in swirly NT plastic, and it is, as I said, a fairway driver rated at 8.501.5. Swirly NT is just a little bit stiffer than the previous NT plastic that we had on the Metal Flake Redemption. And the Enoch also feels a bit bigger in the hand than most 8-speed fairway drivers. And perhaps the only thing that's working against it is the very different experiences that Caleb and I had with it. While I found it flew pretty much exactly like the flight numbers, particularly the sort of mild 1.5 fade, Caleb did not. On every throw, it flipped right over. And I'm not sure if that's down to the shape or what, but it was quick to get on turn and happy to stay there. The Enoch, though, does remind me of a disc that we looked at recently, just in terms of that chunkiness of the fairway driver. The Gateway Sabre was very similar. This difference in stability, though, between Caleb and I started to develop into a little bit of a theme. Case in point, this is the Arc. Rated at 9.4 -1.2, the Arc is a more traditional fairway driver design than the Enoch, and it feels very familiar in my hand. Here once again in Oasis Plastic, it feels a little bit stiffer than the Covenant or Pillar that we tested earlier in Oasis Plastic, but as I alluded to, it flies totally different for me than it does for Caleb. Once again, it was quick to turn over for Caleb. But it held a fairly overstable flight for me. And because of that, it reminds me a lot of the Dynamic Disc's Escape, which at higher speeds was very quick to turn for Caleb, and with enough air under it would fly really, really far, while it just didn't fly as far for me. One thing though is for certain, the next disc in their lineup flies only one way, no matter which way you throw it. This is the Chainbreaker, and I'll let the Chainbreaker introduce itself. Yes, indeed. The Chainbreaker is an extremely flat, extremely stiff, very, very overstable fairway driver. And with the same flight numbers as a Firebird, I think it is safe to compare it to the most overstable Firebirds you have ever seen. Which takes us now on to their distance drivers. Up first from the distance drivers is the Ambush, a very domey, very slippery, understable driver, rated at 12.6, -3.2. In my hand, it does feel a little bit bigger than a 12 speed because it's not super comfortable in my backhand grip. In this Oasis Plastic, it is very understable. Caleb had it rolling on every throw. And I figured I would probably get some huge flex and swing back, but instead, I also got a roller, albeit just a little cut roller. On the bright side, the Ambush did deliver an understable flight, both for Caleb and for me, so at least the flight numbers seem to be pretty accurate. I would compare the Ambush to some of the really, really understable discs that we tested back in our understable distance drivers comparison on Flight Numbers Don't Matter, like the Lone Star Harrier or Discmania Astronaut. Super domey and super understable. Next up, you know it, you love it, it's the obligatory Destroyer in every manufacturer's lineup. And for Goliath, it is called the Rapture. Rated at 12.5, -1.3, the Rapture is here today in their Metal Flake NT plastic, and it feels great. While it's definitely not a traditional Destroyer shape, it does feel pretty good in either forehand or backhand grip. And finally, we have two consistent flights from Caleb and I. Both of us go a bit high on our release, but that's not the end of the world. Since we had a good nose angle, which lets our Raptures hold straight for a bit before showing that reliable overstability. I think the Rapture does technically fit into that Destroyer mold, but it's pretty overstable, so I think it's a little bit more like something like a Discraft Force that gets a little bit less turn, which leads us to our last disc, the Slingshot. The Slingshot is Goliath's only 13-speed disc, rated at 13.5, -2.2. Almost the exact same flight numbers as the Innova Shrike. It is also quite domey, very aerodynamic, and it must be a true 13-speed because it feels even worse in my backhand grip than the Ambush. And I think the Slingshot is the first disc today to really show both turn and fade in equal parts, for me at least. On several occasions, I got a full flight out of it, pushing to maybe 330 feet. Hopefully, I didn't actually have the rangefinder out today. But with Caleb's extra power here, the Slingshot showed a lot more turn. So I don't think I'd recommend it for faster arm speeds. It reminds me a lot of the Axiom Tenacity or the MVP Catalyst. These are wide rim, fast distance drivers with this sort of sweet spot instability. If you add too much power, they're going to burn over, but if you have just the right amount, you can get them to flip up and ride straight or maybe get just a subtle turn and fade. And distance drivers are something I'm feeling a little extra familiar with because the Slingshot will be competing with 37 other distance drivers next week on our Flight Numbers Don't Matter video, where we'll be answering the question, can distance drivers actually fly straight? Check back next week for that one. Anyways, today it's all about Goliath discs. So what have we made of this whole 12-disc lineup? Well, firstly, as a fan of symmetry, I love that there are 3 discs for each disc type. different stabilities for each, or at least they intended to have different stabilities for each. And the variety of plastic and choice of disc means that there's a great lineup here for a company that only had their first disc approved in December of 2021. Now, religion can be a divisive topic. I've seen people complain online when Gannon Buhr or Isaac Robinson makes mention of their beliefs in an interview after a big win. But regardless of whether you agree with their marketing choice or not, more discs from more manufacturers only increases competition in the disc golf market, and it forces the Innovas and Discrafts of our world to stay on their toes, keep innovating and pushing the boundaries of what discs can do. So thanks again to Goliath Discs for sending us these discs to test. If you're interested in trying any of these discs, you can buy the exact discs we tested today while supplies last on our website, sixsideddiscs.com, at 10% off since they were lightly used. And remember, if you join us as a member, you could get 5, 10, or 20% off your order, in addition to that 10% lightly used discount. You can learn more about becoming a member at the link in the description or by clicking the join button below this video. What do you all think of Goliath discs? Have you thrown any of them? Tell us about your experiences in the comments below. And also comment below what discs, brands, or topics you'd like us to explore in the future. For Six Sided Discs, I'm Greg. We'll see you in the next one. Hello. Which means this week, we're not only testing each of these 12 molds, but also determining... Okay, hold on. I'm going to rewrite this real quick. No, I'm not. Never mind. New manufacturers are popping up all the time, and it's our mission here at Six Sided Discs to get our hands on those discs and figure out what we can learn. Okay. And I was so impressed I gave the Caleb the old... Huh? But there's a lot more to Goliath discs than this. With previous experience as both an apparel... Caleb be through... Because as you can see here... But maybe that's just me. In this OA stick... And I think the Slingshot... Or at least they depend... And also comment below what other brands, discs, or topics you'd like to... If you like this content and want to see more, please consider liking the video, subscribing to our channel, or becoming a member. Your support makes this content possible.